to turn now to a story about the management of strategic alliances, the benefits, the costs. This was developed by and presented by Corey Brown, who was a doctoral student of mine who's now teaching up in Washington State, who had significant experience in this area. The title, Alliances, the Poor Man's Substitute, refers back to the first slide in today's lecture, where we discussed the fact that alliances are a very expensive way to access resources and expose you to risks. Corey's personal experience, as we will see, demonstrates that. The topics that we're going to go through in these slides that ahead concern how to manage dyadic alliance, two parties, and multi-partner alliances, which are large associations of firms who are sharing a common technology platform or a standard. And the question then is why and how do you participate and what are the benefits of it? The cautionary tale here is to think about alliances as a poor man's substitutes. The bottom line is that in order to preserve assets, it's very tempting to go out and to try to forge an alliance to gain access to resources, technologies at no cost to you. The problem that you have is that in attempting to do so, you often end up paying a price that far exceeds what might be available to you, and in fact being victimized. Therefore, you end up continuing the poor man cycle rather than prospering from them. Some alliances can and do succeed, and the thing about them is it's rare. There's a few things that you need to understand. The options are to buy, build, or partner, and there's a couple of different forms of joint ventures or alliances that you can form, some of which have equity, some non-equity, and the joint venture format itself. The challenge you face is how do you achieve a cooperative agreement in a way that minimizes the risk of cheating? The risks of cheating are rooted into four threats to cooperation. The first one, adverse selection, means simply that you made the wrong choice. You partnered with somebody who is not capable of delivering what they promised. They lack the technology, they lack the expertise, and so forth. And until you get into a operating agreement, an operating relationship with them, you won't know whether or not they're actually capable of delivery. Moral hazard is simply that there's a temptation to lie. People have incentive to free ride, to take shortcuts, and people have temptation to exploit you, to hold you up, to appropriate benefits from the relationship that end up costing you. So the challenge here on just trying to think that why alliances are advantageous are that the ability to gain access to resources traded off against the threats or risks that you experience along the way. Going back, if you went back in and took a look at some of these companies, Corey, of course, had a variety of strategic alliances in which he was a partner. The one we referred to here, which is the Cadence Encounter with VCAD Services. This is when Corey was VP of Wireless at ZMD. It was a customer supplier relationship. The deal was fairly straightforward with Cadence. They had a long-standing relationship. They had something we didn't. We called, they delivered, we paid, and now they're exploiting what they delivered. So what happens here is that both parties benefited. They each brought to the table something that they could prosper from. They had a good relationship. And in this particular case, because of that relationship, forming an alliance is very easy. As Corey says, it only took one call, no transaction costs. In an alliance with Hillicom on the Zigbee product, the challenge was that they needed a particular technology. Money's limited. They didn't have external expertise. and they were trying to develop something that they really hadn't yet specified, but they had this sense that this was going to be important and that they needed to work in that particular space. In particular, they made hardware, they needed software. How do you do it? So you find somebody who can provide software. So they announced a joint development and marketing agreement. They defined a contract, they brought people together, and they met in a room. And what happened? Well, what happened was it broke. Both parties were incapable of delivering both the hardware and the software that they needed. There was moral hazard involved. The developer promised but failed to develop effective working software, and it turned out they actually lacked the capacity to program and deliver the software needed to begin with. So there was a story about their development skills that was misrepresented. There was holdup involved because there are resources engaged here that they both invested in that they ended up walking away with. In this case, Corey benefited from. The takeaway for this one: cheating hurts, even if it's unintentional, even if you honestly misrepresent your level of skills, it still hurts. It's going to follow up the relationship, and you have to be careful. And the problem is that, honest misrepresentation, just honestly not knowing what your skill levels are and what you're capable of truly doing when challenged to develop a new product or service, can lead to problems down the road that will undermine an alliance. Uh, there are also alliances that work very well. With Renesas, this is a $6 billion company. Corey worked on developing this relationship for 3 years, including all of the traditional partying in Tokyo stories that involve a great deal of alcohol and things like that, which are quite hard for Bishop Corey to put up with, but he did. He managed through it. Once they were able to develop the relationship, they ended up with something that quite productive. It was a trade of expertise, general purpose chips, specialized chips, a co-marketed solution, a subsequent reinvestment of partnership over time, and it worked out great. The agreement turned out to be simple. They never used the contract. They were open to each other. They both made profit, and they did so because they had a solid working relationship. In both cases, then that he just described here, success was based on existing relationships, not in contract. Things that were new relationships formed for explicit purposes, framed by contract, failed. So if you're going to structure for success, what you really want to do is, even though you have to start with contract, you need to put yourself in a place where people have incentive to work together and work toward developing trust in terms of a hierarchy, contract, equity investment, a solid firm reputation, forming a joint venture where both parties have a vested interest in creation of a separate entity, and development of high levels of trust all lead to success. So the practical advice is ally when the partner has something that's rare, really hard to get. There is great market or technological risk that you alone could not bear, and you need flexibility. When approaching the deal, you need to plan beyond contractually for cheating, which is to say you need to really properly assess the talents and skills of the people engaged, and to form arrangements and agreements with people who will be there. Obviously, forming a relationship with a key individual who then walks out the door leaves you in a very risky position. So all of it comes down to human human relationships, long-term relationships. Multi-partner alliances are common. The Bluetooth alliance is the example given here. The question with multi-partner alliances is whether or not you get involved. What happens are there are a lot of things that happen and you benefit from. By participating, you get on the bandwagon. The alliance itself helps build energy and momentum. You build relationships that you can benefit from. The risk of technological development is borne by a variety of partners, of whom you are just one member, and so the standard should advance more quickly. Knowledge is more readily codified, and you get to ride along and benefit from open participation. The problem, of course, is what happens if that alliance ends up going down the wrong direction that's not compatible with your vision or particular needs. There is spillover effects, both positive and negative, onto your reputation from selecting to join one alliance or another. Bluetooth, for example, has developed expertise for a particular set of products, wideband another. Um, and early on, however, it was promised and it was um, believed that Bluetooth had a far wider range of product applications than it turned out to be. Um, if there is a market leader, someone who dominates that alliance, then you end up following a leader. You have no choice but to follow a leader, and that might not be a company you would like to keep, and it can shut off avenues of participation. When you think about it strategically, what you need to think about typically is your timing of entry. When do you want to get engaged? When and what role do you want to play? Corey did a lot of research on this, and basically, what the um, data shows is is simply that if you are in a position where you are large and can influence the shape of the development of a standard, in this case, what it was decisions affecting the application of Bluetooth into product and its capability set. The big players benefited early on from shaping the technology to go in a direction that supported their strengths. Product companies that entered early tended not to benefit because the standard was still in flux. Product companies that entered at mid-tier prospered, they did well. Companies that entered late and adopting the standard and relate to the dance tended not to benefit from the product as well because they relate to the technology cycle and the benefits have been dissipated. Um, so what you end up with is depending on what type of company you are dictates and your size dictates your choice and order of entry. The Bluetooth Alliance has 12,000 members, lots of companies, and lots of big players. As Corey went through it again, sorry, this is a repeat of an earlier slide. There are a variety of benefits from choice, but it all depended on the timing of entry. The conclusions that I wanted to share with you from Corey is that if you are partnering, if it's a dyad, if it's two of you, you got to plan for cheating and you want to build your relationship on personal relationships, not on contract. Contract are costly, contracts are impersonal, contracts don't work very well because, among other things, you need to rely on attorneys and courts for enforcement, and those are very, very expensive. Multi-partner alliances, when you think about them, the benefits from entry vary over time. Those who are actively engaged benefit more than those who are on the fringes. It is a great place for new ventures. The question is when to get engaged with your new product, and the answer to that is not in the very early stages, but as you believe things are taking more solid form such that you can plan a generation or two of product technology is the time to join. Corey's conclusion, don't make alliance the poor man's substitute. What he says is if you partnered with him, he would enter your company and within 30 days have sucked the technology out of it and leave you, and withdraw, leaving you down the road with nothing to build on down the road in a very short period of time. And that, as a matter of fact, was his strategy in most cases when dealing with small firms. So you expose yourself to a significant amount of risk in choosing to try to gain resources that you need as an alliance through alliance when you're better served by trying to develop it yourself or buying it on the open market. Thanks. I will be looking forward to seeing you in class next week.